Hey guys, it's Dani. Welcome to another episode from our Orchid Care for Beginners series. Today, we have a subject that is just slightly more advanced. We're going to talk about older orchids which have a long neck or a long stem, such as this one. After years of very good care, you might be surprised to see that your orchid is starting to look more like a palm tree rather than the orchid you purchased. And that is perfectly fine. What is not so fine is sometimes the way it looks. Many people find it aesthetically unpleasing. Also, you might have a whole bunch of dried roots on the orchid together with some good roots. And also the orchid might become slightly unstable in its pot. Now, all of these things are quite normal. And don't worry, the orchid is not sick. So today I'm going to show you how to tidy up a little bit this orchid and how to make it look pretty once again. Today's video, together with our entire Orchid Care for Beginners series, is sponsored by Repotme.com, who offers you everything you could possibly need to properly take care of your orchid. From potting mixes to pots, fertilizers, and all sorts of accessories, they have it all. Now, if you're into other types of houseplants, good news, they have something for you as well, as they're just expanding their line to cater to other houseplants as well. And another piece of good news, if you're in the UK or the European Union, there are some products available in this region as well. I will link you down below to all that I can at the moment. And in the future, Repotme will slowly introduce other products that are of major interest, such as the MSU fertilizer, which I'm kind of out of personally. But yeah, you're gonna find all of these links down in the description. Feel free to visit them at any time. Right, so before we start, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? I post multiple times a week. Righty then, let's get to work, because my orchid needs a serious repot. Alright, so why do Phalaenopsis orchids actually end up like this? And by the way, this happens to standard Phalaenopsis, but also to miniature Phalaenopsis. It really doesn't matter. Well, in time, they will regenerate their leaves. All of them will be left with a number of leaves on, but the oldest leaves, in time, they will yellow and dry off and just fall. So what's left behind is the actual axis or stem. Now, roots also with age can dry off and be replaced by brand new healthy roots. So something like this is not really abnormal, but I will give it does look a little scary. It looks like the orchid is a little sick, which she's not. She's actually in quite a good condition. She has regenerated quite a lot of structures, and oh boy, I seriously need to repot this one. This has been potted for more than 2 years in this little pot. Luckily, it doesn't smell that bad, so the situation is not out of control. The medium is not acidic, or not as acidic to completely kill off the roots. And the roots, some of them are still good in the pot, but others just don't look so good anymore. It's typically the aerial ones, which in time maybe they desiccated a little bit too much. They're very old roots. It's absolutely fine to remove them because we have a lot of new roots growing. Right, so just like with any other repotting, I'm going to press a little bit on the pot. I'm gonna try to pull up. The orchid might not want to because many roots have grown from the drainage holes and ventilation holes. And it's absolutely fine if some of the roots are damaged in the process. Okay, these are dried roots. Can remove them. And there we have it. We did lose a root, but that is okay. We have a lot of them. So let's remove the potting mix and see what we have here. Alrighty, so as far as I can see, the potting mix is not really all that degraded. It lasted very well. The sphagnum moss surprisingly well. I think this is Reptibark bark. I have some hydrogen here. And overall, the smell is quite pleasant. Wow, I am very happy with this. I think it's one of the Repotme mixes that if you want to see me try, I will share with you the link down below. Currently, I'm not allowed to import from outside of the European Union, which is why I cannot wait for Repotme to become available in the EU with all of their products. But yeah, the medium is in perfect condition. Alright, next up, it is important to remove all of the dried and dead roots because they will spoil the fresh new medium much faster. When they start to break down, as any organic material naturally does, they release byproducts, they create an acidic environment, which is not a healthy environment for the brand new roots. In a pot, everything is very confined, breaking down in our homes doesn't happen as it happens in nature. There are things missing, microorganisms and insects missing. So even though what's happening is natural, it just doesn't happen all that well in our apartments, in our homes, and so on. So we need to remove all of this dead organic material. Alright, so we removed everything that was dried and didn't look healthy anymore. What I want to show you guys is that some of the roots have the initial start of the root dry and then the root becomes green. Now, you might be tempted to leave this root on, and sometimes the root can actually last for quite a bit of time. But the difference is the portion of the stem that produces it is still alive. On this orchid, there is a bottom portion of the stem that really does not look all that healthy and functional anymore. Let me give you a close-up. There we go. Can we actually see a very clear line between a green healthy stem portion and a very old dried portion? In time, even the stem will actually dry out. And even though this particular orchid doesn't have an extremely long neck, some orchids will develop it depending how old they are and how fast they grew, and of course how many leaves they shed. So in this instance, even though some of the roots still have good segments in them, the upper segment is completely dry. What's happening here, because the stem is dead, is that the root dries up in the opposite direction. Sometimes the orchids will decide to pull all of that moisture and nutrients from the roots, but sometimes, in my experience, I noticed they just don't. And eventually this root, which otherwise on an orchid without a long neck would have survived, on this one, it just doesn't. That's my experience with these orchids, so I will not try to save the oldest roots which might still have substance, because I already have brand new roots which will continue to sustain the orchid. Alrighty, are you ready for the nerve-wracking part? Yeah, we're gonna cut part of the stem. And I personally like to cut a little below the green side. So what I want to do is make sure that I do not open a door for pathogens to enter the axis of the orchid. I want to keep this as safe as possible, so what I will do is get myself a really sharp pair of pruners. I would not recommend scissors. You need something stronger, something that can cut small branches. That would be great. You will see that the stem becomes a lot thinner where it's already starting to dry off. It might not be completely dry, but it's not going to be completely green either. So I'm gonna go slightly below and give a good cut. Are you ready? Let's do this. There we go. So let me give you a close-up of the section. You can see the actual stem here is very, very thin. It's not green anymore. It is in the process of drying out. The part of the stem that you just cut might actually still have some roots, but if you compare how these roots look like to these ones, there is a very, very clear difference. This does not look as healthy anymore, and that's because it's just not. It's a very old section of the orchid, which slowly and surely is just depleting itself. Now this section can vary in length, as I was saying. My orchid is not incredibly old, but still she was starting to become wobbly in her pot. What do we do about this section? Typically, with a cut wound, I would like to apply some cinnamon powder on it, but because this will sit in the pot, it will be exposed to moisture, cinnamon will not actually do anything. And also, on woody parts such as old stems and also rhizomes, I find it unnecessary to try and seal the area. If you feel more comfortable in trying to seal the area, you can actually use hot glue or the wax from any type of candle you have in your home. I personally today will not use anything because this is almost a dried stem. The chances of pathogens actually affecting the orchid are minimal. Pathogens travel through healthy structures that have a vigorous sap flow, which this one, in my opinion, doesn't anymore. All right, so I'm going to throw away all of this and come back with a clean tray. All right, so next up, potting the orchid as normal. I chose a pot which can definitely fit all of the roots of the orchid, plus whatever roots the orchid might want to produce. Now, some of these roots, as you can see, they're what we call aerial, meaning they didn't grow in the potting mix. I will leave them out since they're not really adapted to the high levels of moisture from the medium. I do have quite a lot in the pot, but these ones, they will only just start to grow in the medium. So these ones, I will try to direct them towards the pot, and most probably they will be okay, they will adapt. This one though, I will leave it be. So as usual, I'm going to be using a bark and sphagnum moss mix, very similar to the previous mix this orchid was potted in, and just layer so that all of the pot is evenly moist. I started off with the sphagnum moss layer since this pot is not raised. One of the best things about the slotted pots from Repot Me is that they are not raised, and if you by chance have excess water that just didn't have time to get absorbed by the sphagnum moss, if you have it pooling at the bottom of your tray or decorative pot, this layer will absorb it and direct it in the pot, making everything very, very even. Let's just try to fit the orchid as best as possible in the pot. I'm not gonna try to bury it, but also you can see the orchid is definitely not so raised in the pot. It's gonna look much, much better, and the roots will grow inside the medium again. No boy, all of the lights came on in the plant room. I have to adjust my camera settings. Another bad thing about orchids with long necks is that the roots start to grow from way above the potting mix, and sometimes they will just grow kind of horizontally. They will not reach the potting mix, so they will not benefit from the moisture that the potting mix can provide. They will also not benefit from the same level of nutrients, and even though they will be absolutely fine since Phalaenopsis are epiphytic orchids, in cultivation it is preferable for the roots to be inside the pot, because in this way we make sure that they have access to the moisture and the nutrients we provide. Otherwise, if there are more aerial roots than potted roots, we would be forced to spray them regularly, and many people just don't have time to do that, leaving the orchid possibly too thirsty and even depleted of nutrients. So as you can see, we need to adapt a little bit to this alien life that is our living room. And when I say this, I mean alien for them. Their ancestors are used to very, very different conditions than what we can provide. But luckily for us, these orchids are very forgiving and very adaptable to our living rooms as well, with the condition that we adjust a few things. I personally like to add a little bit of slow release fertilizer in the pot as well, particularly with Phalaenopsis, which you wouldn't say, but they're quite heavy feeders. Okay, so my orchid is all potted up and it's already looking so much better. We actually have a brand new flower spike growing as well. Since this orchid is a flower shop, no ID Phalaenopsis, I don't know how it's called, but I will make a tag for it. I'm just gonna write its description, but most importantly, I'm gonna write the date that I repotted it, because in about a year's time, I will need to add a little bit more slow release fertilizer. So it's November 2021. And the front of the label will be filled in when it blooms, because I really don't remember how the blooms look like. I'm sure she's beautiful. Next up, I'm gonna give this orchid a good watering as usual. Put it in a decorative pot, which permits ventilation because it's not a snug decorative pot. And there we go, my orchid should be fine for at least another 2 years. Alright, so this orchid is ready to continue her healthy life in my plant room. A few ideas before we end today's video. It is absolutely fine if you don't want to cut the stem. Orchids do have various ways of protecting themselves, of sealing off certain structures, and just naturally shedding them. The problem is, as I was saying, our living room really doesn't work like nature would. So in our pots, we will have accumulations of organic debris, things that will break down and acidify and spoil the current medium. So for this reason, it is actually much safer to remove all of these dried bits from our orchids, not to mention our own personal aesthetics. This orchid looks much tidier and much happier, quote unquote, the way it looks now. It's not necessarily happier, but we did make sure that in the future we won't actually have bad effects on our orchids due to those organic debris breaking down in the potting mix. Alrighty guys, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and you learned something new. Thank you Repot Me for sponsoring yet another episode from this wonderful Orchid Care for Beginners series. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!